Let's talk about how many schools you should apply to. There's an overall thought that you should apply to 10. Now, this may seem overwhelming to you, or you may think that's not enough. People are all over the map on this. I'm going to talk as though 10 is the normal number, but I want you to feel like you have permission to apply to as few or as many as you would like. My only suggestion is that you absolutely have 2 schools which are likely, so that when you get in, you'll have a choice. So let's go over this. I have put together a tracking, this is a tracking worksheet or a tracking list, because you're going to need data to find out if you're a good candidate, and you're going to want to keep track of everything that goes on. So you will see from this list, for this particular student, we came up with a bunch of options. So I have on the left-hand side the different schools. For this particular example, I'm going to assume that the person is a Virginia resident, which means they're going to get in-state tuition in Virginia. And we're using that just as a cost of attendance point of comparison so that you have a sense of what that is. And these are the schools that we're looking at, the locations. Then you'll see the sizes, how big they are, whether they're public or private, whether or not they're test optional, the score ranges for each one, how much they cost, and average financial aid given, the acceptance rate, and the early decision acceptance rate, deadlines, and decision. So let's just go over one of these. American University, great school in this beautiful section of Washington, D.C. The size for the undergraduates are around 8,000. It is a private school. It is also test optional. These are their typical score ranges. If you test below that, then you should not be submitting your scores. If you test above this, then you should, even though it's test optional, because that may add additional boost to your application. The cost to attend it is almost $65,000. They do give financial aid of almost $38,000. So that brings down the cost tremendously. But keep in mind, financial aid can be grants and scholarships, but also loans. So, and this is the average. So half are above, half are below. Their acceptance rate now, American is really skewed on this more than any other school I've ever seen. Their overall acceptance rate is 29%, which is a fairly selective university. However, their early decision acceptance rate is coming in at 81% at the time I'm making this video. So 8 out of every 10 people that are applying get in. And then, they have deadlines. The deadlines you're going to fill out are going to be based on what your application strategy is. Are you going to apply early decision or regular decision, early action if they have it? And then what's the decision? So this is something to keep in mind. Most schools do not have an 81% acceptance rate for early decision, but most schools do have an above average acceptance rate for early decision. Remember, early decision is a binding experience. So if you apply early decision, you're going to go, and that's the way that whole thing is set up. So again, you see a higher than average Bucknell. They're normally 31%, but they're 56% in the early decision range. And you'll see in this example, I have lots of schools numbers because I want you to see them, and you can find this data on the Common Data Set. And that is in the videos, how to go through the Common Data Set and find this, because this is super important information for you. One thing I do want to show you is the in-state. So again, I said this was an in-state person. You can see the tremendous, University of Colorado Boulder is a public school. This student would be applying out of state. So they are going to have a much higher tuition number than people who live in Colorado have. I think it's like 33,000 for people who live in Colorado. I'm not sure about that though. And overall, they have almost an 80% acceptance rate. Let's talk about this number for a minute, acceptance rate. This is kind of how you tell if you're in the reach, safe, or match area, or reach, match, likely area. And again, it depends. That's why I have those early decisions and numbers on there. Because normally I'd say American, that could be a reach match because a 30% acceptance rate isn't that high. But if you apply an early decision, your chances are really good. Boulder's going to be depending on anything in the 70s, 80s, 90s. That's going to be on the more likely side if you're a fairly decent student. Now, with state schools such as Boulder and Virginia and North Carolina, whatever, the number of students that get in often is it's easier, not all the time, but most of the time, it's easier for in-state students to get admitted than it is for out-of-state students. I want to give you an example. So I have down here Charlottesville, University of Virginia. They're showing an acceptance rate of 27%. It is not that high. Well, it may be that high, but it's going to be super selective for out-of-state students. So it depends on how big the applicant pool is. They also just went back to doing early decision. They did it a long time ago, and now they're back. So I don't actually have stats on them. But when you look for their common data set, you'll be able to see it. So in going through this, you can tell Middlebury, 17%, that is a highly selective school. Lehigh, 25, Reed College, 35, Syracuse, 46%. And then, you just get a really good sense when you look at this list of how competitive they are, how competitive you are in the process. You make sure you've got 3 reach schools, like, within distance, not like super, super reach. 3 match schools where their profile matches your number, so your GPA and your test scores, and 3 likely schools where you're above what they typically take. Often there's a correlation between the acceptance rate, let's do just a regular an acceptance rate and the SAT, ACT range. So the more selective schools tend to be higher in these numbers than the less selective schools. So for instance, at Boulder, you have a 25 to 30 range. Middlebury, you have a 30 to 34 range. So you can see how that would happen. And remember, ranges, again, many are higher and many are lower. And then, so if you do 3 match, 3 safe, or 3 likely, and 3 reach, that gives you 9. And then you can do 1 wild card. Just take a chance. And if there's 1 school, see what happens. Keep in mind, again, this financial aid, I want you to just be aware of it because there's a lot of student debt right now. And if you do decide to go down this path, it's fine. Just have an awareness that the financial aid packages that schools are posting often include loans, but not always. And they'll say mostly grants and scholarships. Well, let them decide what that is. And, if you have a school you're interested in, apply and see what they offer you because you're awesome and they should offer you the world. So here's my applicant tracking system. You can also use, if your school uses Naviance or SCORE, those are 2 programs that work well. There's honestly a lot of programs out there, but those are the 2 most popular. But you don't need those. You can also do it this way. And you just go through and you gather the data. And if you look at the College Navigator, which I'll have the link here too, along with the worksheet, then you're set. You've got all the data you need and you can track when your deadlines are, and you'll put those on your calendar. We want to keep all this information so that you are so well prepared. All right. Best of luck.